My sister slapped my baby at Christmas dinner, said I was overreacting. Everyone just sat there, but then my military commander husband stood up, looked her straight in the eye and said, "Get out." She never returned. Gather round, because what I'm about to tell you, it still makes my blood run cold. Can you imagine your own sister, at Christmas dinner, slapping your 6-month-old baby across the face? And then, the ultimate betrayal, your entire family just sat there, frozen, like it was perfectly normal. That night, everything changed. Hi, I'm Natalie. Last Christmas, that nightmare became my reality. My sister, Vanessa, physically struck my infant son, Lucas, right in front of our entire family. For a horrifying moment, no one moved. No one spoke. They just stared. Like this monstrous act was just part of the holiday cheer. But then, my husband David, a man whose quiet authority comes from years as a military commander, slowly rose from his chair. And what happened next ripped our family apart, but also started a journey to reclaim ourselves. Just 3 days later, I uncovered a truth that made me realize this wasn't just about one slap. This was about 28 years of me being utterly invisible in my own family. Christmas dinner at the Sterling household had always been Vanessa's personal stage, and December 23rd was no different. She rolled up 2 hours late in her pristine white Tesla, hauling in ring lights and a whole camera crew. Her mission? To document her authentic family Christmas experience for her lifestyle blog. I stood in the kitchen doorway, gently bouncing a fussy Lucas, who was just waking from his nap, watching my mom, Patricia, frantically rearrange the dining room. Every piece of furniture, every decoration, all shifted to accommodate Vanessa's perfect shot. The house smelled like cinnamon and roasted turkey, but underneath it all, that familiar, suffocating tension of a Sterling family gathering hung heavy in the air. My dad, Robert, sat glued to his phone, a master of selective blindness, especially when Vanessa was involved. He perfected the art of ignoring chaos over the years. Vanessa had been hyping this dinner for weeks online, calling it her family gratitude special. What she conveniently left out was that David had just returned from a 6-month deployment overseas, or that we'd driven 3 hours to introduce Lucas to his grandparents for the first time. None of that mattered to Vanessa's perfect narrative. David emerged from the guest room, looking impossibly sharp in his dress uniform, even off duty. That quiet authority, that leader's presence, was always there. He caught my eye across the room, giving me one of those small, reassuring smiles that always told me, "We've got this." Even when I wasn't so sure. The dining room? It looked like a magazine spread. Our grandmother's antique candlesticks were shoved aside for camera equipment. Family photos relocated. Even the napkin swapped out for something more photogenic. Vanessa was directing her cameraman like it was a commercial, which, let's be real, it basically was. Mom fluttered around Vanessa, adjusting everything to her eldest daughter's impossibly high standards. Our perfectly cool turkey now sat under heat lamps, just for the camera. Side dishes rearranged 3 times. Even the flowers were swapped for Vanessa's more aesthetic Portland arrangement. I'd learned long ago to just bite my tongue. Growing up, pointing out the absurdity only ever earned me lectures about supporting family and how some people just had bigger dreams. The message was always clear: I was small-minded, jealous, threatened. David helped me settle Lucas into his high chair, an old, solid wood heirloom from David's grandmother. It looked so out of place amidst Vanessa's curated perfection. Lucas gurgled, happy, reaching for his toys, utterly oblivious to the fact that he was about to become an unwilling prop in his aunt's content empire. The meal began with Vanessa's customary gratitude speech, delivered directly to her camera. We all sat in awkward silence, listening. She rambled about family traditions and togetherness, somehow speaking for nearly 10 minutes without mentioning David's deployment, Lucas's first Christmas, or really, any of the actual people sitting at the table. When she finally signaled for the filming to pause, the air shifted slightly. Mom immediately served Vanessa first, of course. Dad emerged from his phone long enough to carve the turkey, though he kept glancing nervously at the cameras. David and I exchanged glances, trying to eat while keeping Lucas entertained and quiet. The conversation, if you can call it that, flowed in its predictable pattern. Vanessa dominated, updating everyone on her latest brand deals and collaborations. Mom hung on her every word, asking about follow accounts as if taking a masterclass. I tried to chime in, talking about our life at Fort Henderson, David's promotion, adjusting to parenthood. My stories just vanished. Polite nods, then back to Vanessa's world. It felt like trying to add ingredients to a recipe that was already baked, served, and plated. David noticed. He always does. He'd ask me follow-up questions, drawing me back in, talking about his pride in how I'd handled deployment. His efforts were kind, but they only highlighted how little my own family cared about my actual life. Lucas, bless him, was being incredibly well behaved for a 6-month-old, content with his teething toys. He'd babble or laugh occasionally, drawing fleeting smiles before the adult conversation resumed. He was fascinated by Vanessa's lights, reaching for them with that fierce baby focus. Midway through the main course, Vanessa decided she needed some candid family interaction footage. She had her cameraman position himself to capture what she called the natural holiday moments. Natural? We were performing dinner for thousands. She told us to eat and talk normally, while she provided commentary about the beautiful chaos of family gatherings. This is when things started to unravel, subtly at first. Vanessa was a control freak, but the filming pressure and her desperate need to be the center of attention were clearly escalating her stress. She kept calling for resets if conversations weren't perfect, if someone's expression wasn't right, if background noise interfered. Meanwhile, Lucas was getting tired. His cheerful babbling morphed into that low whimper any parent recognizes as the prelude to a full-blown meltdown. David and I tried to soothe him. Unfamiliar place, disrupted nap, all the strange activity, it was too much. I suggested taking him to the guest room to calm down, but Vanessa immediately shot me down. She was filming the heart of the segment. People leaving would ruin the content. She insisted babies were adaptable, a little fussing was normal, and I shouldn't interrupt her special family time. Mom agreed, calling me overly cautious. Dad just nodded from behind his plate. David's jaw tightened, that telltale sign he was choosing his words carefully. He gently suggested a short break from filming. But Vanessa was already pivoting. She'd incorporate Lucas's fussing into her narrative about the beautiful messiness of real family life. She started speaking to her camera, babbling about flexibility and patience with little ones, how unexpected moments make the best memories. Lucas's whimpering escalated into full-blown, heartbroken sobs. The kind that rip through you. I reached for him instinctively, but Vanessa held up her hand. Stop. She was still filming. Still trying to capture this authentic moment. She actually thought his distress was adding authenticity. David's face went completely still, the look he reserved for command situations. He watched Vanessa with the intense scrutiny he'd use for a potential threat. I could see him calculating, weighing options, searching for a diplomatic solution to protect our son. I reached for Lucas again. Again, Vanessa stopped me. This time, more direct. You're being dramatic, she snapped. A little crying never hurt anyone. She even reminded me she'd babysat in high school. Lucas's cries intensified, a desperate, gut-wrenching wail. The sound filled the room, overpowering Vanessa's continued commentary. She seemed oblivious, but everyone else had stopped eating, stopped pretending. Then it happened. Vanessa, clearly infuriated that Lucas's crying was ruining her audio, leaned across the table. Her hand moved with terrifying speed. For a second, I didn't even register it. Then, a sharp crack. Her palm against Lucas's cheek. The room went silent. Lucas's wailing stopped, instantly. Replaced by a shocked, horrified silence. Then came a shriek from Lucas, unlike anything I'd ever heard. A sound of pure bewilderment and pain that pierced my soul. His tiny cheek was already turning red where she'd struck him. Nobody moved. Mom sat frozen, fork halfway to her mouth. Dad's eyes were wide, but he remained glued to his chair. The cameraman kept filming, unsure. Vanessa herself seemed momentarily stunned by her own actions. But David moved. He rose from his chair, a slow, controlled precision born of years in high-stakes situations. No rush, no explosion, just the deliberate unfolding of a man who had made a decision. His 6'3" frame filled the room, his uniform making him an imposing presence in that suddenly silent space. "Turn off the camera," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the kind of authority that made people listen without question. The cameraman instantly complied. The red light vanished. A deeper silence fell. David walked around the table, the embodiment of calm fury, to where Lucas still sobbed in his high chair. He lifted our son, with the gentle competence of a father who had comforted him through countless nights, holding him close. Lucas's cries began to subside, hiccuping sobs against David's shoulder. "Vanessa," David said, his voice still calm, but with an edge that made everyone sit up straighter. "You just struck my infant son." He let the words hang in the air. "I need you to explain to me why you thought that was acceptable." Vanessa's face cycled through shades of pale shock to defensive red. He was being disruptive, she spat, her voice higher now. I was trying to teach him that crying isn't appropriate at the dinner table. Sometimes children need clear boundaries. David's calm was terrifying. He's 6 months old, he replied. He doesn't understand boundaries. He understands that someone hurt him. He gently adjusted Lucas, checking the faint red mark on his cheek. And you struck him hard enough to leave a mark. The room remained frozen. Mom finally found her voice, a weak whisper. Vanessa, honey, you shouldn't have. Don't, David interrupted, his voice not rising, but somehow cutting through the air. Don't minimize this. Don't excuse it. And don't you dare suggest that what just happened was acceptable in any way. He turned back to Vanessa, who was now desperately looking for support that wasn't coming. You are going to pack up your equipment and leave now. And you are not going to come near my family again until you can explain to me how you plan to ensure this never happens again. Vanessa's mouth opened and closed. You can't just. I mean, this is my family, too. You can't ban me from family gatherings. Her voice was gaining strength, defensive anger replacing the shock. You're being completely unreasonable. It was barely a tap. You're acting like I committed some terrible crime. David's expression remained impassive, but his posture shifted. Anyone who had served under him would recognize the warning signs. Barely a tap that left a mark on my infant son's face, he repeated. A tap administered because he was crying. Which is literally the only way babies have to communicate distress. He looked around the table, his gaze settling on each family member. And not one of you moved to stop her. Not one of you said a word. You all sat here and watched someone strike a baby, and you're now trying to minimize it because she's family. The truth of his words hit the room like a physical blow. Mom's face crumpled with something that might have been shame. Dad finally looked up, though he couldn't meet David's eyes. Vanessa's anger wavered, replaced by something that looked almost like dawning recognition. But it was too late. David had made his decision. Natalie, he said, turning to me, his expression gentle despite everything. Lucas's things. We're leaving. He paused, looking back at the family that had just revealed its true colors. And we won't be coming back. I stood on shaky legs, my whole body still reeling. Lucas was calm now in David's arms, but I saw the confusion in his wide eyes, the way he kept touching his cheek. A wave of protective fury, unlike anything I'd ever known, coursed through me. As I gathered our things, I heard voices from the dining room, Vanessa's, raised in justification, Mom's, pleading, David's, calm but immovable. By the time I returned, David was by the front door, Lucas nestled safely, his diaper bag slung over his shoulder. His face was set in that grim line that meant the decision was final. Vanessa stood near the doorway, blotchy with tears and anger. Mom hovered, wringing her hands. This is insane. Vanessa shrieked as we headed out. You're destroying our family over nothing. Over absolutely nothing. He's fine. Look at him. He's not even crying anymore. David stopped at the threshold, turning back one last time. The fact that you think striking a baby is nothing tells me everything I need to know about your judgment, he said. And the fact that the rest of this family is willing to excuse it tells me everything I need to know about their priorities. He opened the door, and we left. I could hear Mom calling, begging us to come back, but David's stride never faltered. Neither did mine. We drove home in silence. Lucas slept peacefully, his cheek bearing only the faintest pink mark. David's hands gripped the wheel, his jaw still tight. It wasn't until we were safely home, Lucas fed and asleep, that the full weight of it hit me. I sat on the couch, still in my Christmas dinner dress, and just cried. Not just for that night, but for all the years of feeling invisible, dismissed, overlooked by people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. David sat beside me, pulling me close. No words, just presence. He understood. I'm proud of you, I whispered against his shoulder. For what? He asked softly. For standing up. For protecting him. For not letting them minimize what happened. I don't think anyone has ever defended me like that before. His expression softened. That's what real family does, national. They protect each other. They don't excuse abuse, and they don't ask you to tolerate the intolerable for the sake of peace. Later that night, replaying it all, David's words echoed in my mind. This hadn't been an isolated incident. This was the culmination of a lifetime of being asked to accommodate, to be silent, to accept less. But this time was different. This time, someone had stood up. Someone had said no. Someone had made it clear there would be consequences. As I drifted off to sleep, with Lucas safe in his crib, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years, not the fragile peace of avoiding conflict, but the solid peace of knowing my boundaries were respected, my worth recognized. What I didn't know yet was that this was only the beginning. The war was just about to start. 3 days later, the first shot was fired. It was a phone call from Mom while David was feeding Lucas his morning bottle. Mom's voice was strained, rehearsed. "Natalie, honey, I know you're upset, but we need to talk. Vanessa feels terrible. She didn't sleep a wink. She wants to apologize, but she can't if you won't answer her calls." I held the phone away, looking at David, who watched me with concern. Lucas gurgled happily, oblivious. That red mark on his cheek was almost gone, but I could still see it. "Mom," I finally said, "she hit my baby. She struck a 6-month-old child because he was crying. I'm not sure what there is to discuss. She barely touched him, Natalie. You're making this into something much bigger than it was. People make mistakes when they're stressed. You know how important her work is, and the filming was disrupted." I cut her off, heat rising in my chest. "Mom." She slapped Lucas across the face because he was interfering with her social media content. "Do you hear how that sounds?" Mom's sigh crackled through the phone. "You've always been dramatic about these things, sweetheart. Ever since you were little, you've blown situations out of proportion. Vanessa was just trying to teach him some boundaries. Sometimes children need firm guidance. You've always been dramatic." The phrase hit me like cold water. How many times had I heard that? How many times had my legitimate concerns been dismissed? My grip tightened on the phone. He's 6 months old, Mom. He doesn't understand boundaries. He understands that someone hurt him for expressing a basic need. "Now you sound like David," Mom said, and something in her tone made me pause. He's always been very rigid about rules and procedures. Military men often are, but families work differently than the army. Families require flexibility and forgiveness, Natalie. David looked up from Lucas, one eyebrow raised. He'd clearly heard enough. I saw him making mental notes. "What does David have to do with this?" I asked. "Well, he's the one who made the big scene. Vanessa said he was completely unreasonable, ordering people around like he was commanding troops. She said he threatened to ban her from the family." Her voice trailed off, as if David's behavior was utterly unforgivable. A cold dread settled in my stomach. "Mom. David protected our son from someone who had just hit him. That's what fathers do. That's what anyone should do when they see a child being hurt. But Vanessa is family, honey. Family means giving people second chances. It means not letting one mistake destroy relationships that have been built over decades. David doesn't understand that because he didn't grow up with us. He doesn't know how we handle things." The conversation continued for 10 agonizing minutes. Mom painted a picture that bore no resemblance to reality. In her version, Vanessa had barely made contact. Everyone had overreacted. David had turned a minor disagreement into a major crisis because of his inflexibility and outsider perspective. When I finally hung up, David was watching me like he'd just debriefed after a difficult mission. "Let me guess," he said. "It's our fault." "According to my mother, yes. Vanessa feels terrible, but I'm being dramatic, and you're being controlling because you don't understand how families work." David set down Lucas's empty bottle. "And how do families work, according to her?" "Apparently, by excusing abuse and expecting the victims to be understanding about it." I slumped against the counter, exhausted. She actually said you don't understand family dynamics because you didn't grow up with them. "She's right about that," David said quietly. "I didn't grow up with them. I grew up in a family where adults protected children instead of making excuses for people who hurt them." The difference hit me with unexpected force. David's family had challenges, but his parents never excused abuse. His grandmother, Eleanor, had been fiercely protective. An hour later, the phone rang again. This time, Dad. His voice was careful, mediated. He'd clearly been coached. "Natalie, I think we all need to step back and look at this objectively. Your mother told me about her conversation, and it sounds like there might be some miscommunication about what actually happened." "Dad, there's no miscommunication. Vanessa hit Lucas. Multiple people saw it happen. There's nothing unclear." "Well, that's just it. Vanessa said she was just trying to get his attention, maybe redirect his fussing. She might have been a little firmer than necessary, but she never intended to hurt him." And honestly, looking at him now, he seems fine. Children are resilient. I stared at the ceiling, trying to reconcile this. My own father, explaining to me what happened to my own child. Dad, intent doesn't matter when we're talking about hitting a baby. The impact matters. The fact that she thought striking him was an appropriate response to crying matters. But that's the thing, sweetheart. She's not experienced with babies. She was just trying to help. Sometimes people make poor choices when they're trying to handle unfamiliar situations. The conversation mirrored Mom's. Every concern I raised was met with an excuse. Every time I centered Lucas's well-being, it was redirected to Vanessa's feelings, her inexperience, her stress, her good intentions. By the time Dad hung up, I felt like I was losing my mind. Had I misunderstood? Was I overreacting? The voices of my parents, people I'd trusted my entire life, were telling me my perceptions were wrong, my instincts misguided, my husband's response disproportionate. David found me staring at my phone, looking, he later said, like I was in shock. He'd finished putting Lucas down for a nap and knew something had shifted. What did your dad say? He said Vanessa didn't mean to hurt Lucas, that she was just trying to help. Maybe a little firmer than necessary, but children are resilient. I repeated the words flatly. David was quiet. Then, what do you think happened yesterday? The question stunned me. No one else had asked me what I thought. Everyone had been telling me what to think. I think my sister hit my baby because he was crying and it was interfering with her filming. I think it was hard enough to leave a mark and shock him into silence. I think it was completely inappropriate and potentially harmful. I paused, feeling a sliver of clarity return. And I think my parents are more interested in protecting Vanessa from consequences than they are in protecting Lucas from being hurt again. That's what I think. That's what I think too, David said. So, the question is, do you trust your own perceptions, or do you trust people who are telling you that what you saw didn't really happen? It was a fair, devastating question. My parents, who'd shaped my understanding of right and wrong, were asking me to doubt myself. My husband, who'd known me 5 years, had consistently shown clearer moral boundaries. The third call came that afternoon, from Vanessa herself. Her voice was thick with tears, trembling. This was the vulnerable sister I remembered from childhood, not the polished influencer. Nat Tai, I feel so horrible. I haven't eaten or slept. I keep replaying it, wondering how I could have handled things differently. A flicker of hope. Maybe this was the apology. I'm glad you called, Vanessa. Lucas is okay, but I was really shocked. I need to understand why you thought hitting him was an appropriate response. That's just it, she said, her voice strengthening. I don't think I really hit him. I think I just touched his cheek to get his attention. And maybe because everyone was so tense about the filming, it seemed like more than it was. You know how things get blown out of proportion. The hope evaporated. She wasn't apologizing. She was continuing the narrative that I hadn't seen what I'd seen. Vanessa, there was a sound when your hand made contact. There was a mark on his cheek. He went from crying to silent in shock before he started wailing. That's not a gentle touch. But that's what I'm trying to tell you. I think everyone's perception was distorted by the stress, the cameras, David's reaction. It created this atmosphere where a normal interaction got interpreted as something much more serious. My knuckles went white. Are you saying I imagined the mark on my baby's face? I'm saying maybe what looked like a mark was just the natural redness from crying. Maybe what sounded like a slap was just the sound of contact that seemed louder because the room was so quiet. Maybe what felt like a big deal isn't actually as serious as it seemed. The conversation dragged on for 20 minutes. Vanessa had crafted an alternative reality where her actions were reasonable, everyone else's reactions excessive. She'd convinced herself she was the victim of misunderstanding. When I hung up, I felt like I'd been wrestling smoke. Every time I tried to pin down the truth, she redirected. David found me in Lucas's nursery, watching him sleep. He lay on his back, a tiny fist curled near his face, completely peaceful and trusting. The sight of him, so small and defenseless, crystallized everything. She's gaslighting me, I said without turning. All of them are. They're trying to make me believe that what I saw didn't really happen. Yes, David said quietly. They are. Why? Why would my own family try to make me doubt my perceptions about something this serious? David joined me. Because acknowledging what really happened would require them to take action they're not willing to take. It would mean holding Vanessa accountable, disrupting their dynamic. It would mean admitting they failed to protect Lucas, forcing them to examine their own behavior. So instead, they make you the problem. Instead, they make you the problem, I echoed. The fourth call that evening, from Mom again. Her tone had shifted from pleading to frustration. The careful diplomacy was gone. Natalie, I'm concerned about how you're handling this. You're being very rigid and unforgiving, which isn't like you. I'm wondering if maybe the stress of new motherhood is affecting your judgment. David tensed beside me. That was a low blow, and we both knew it. Mom, my judgment is fine. My priorities are clear. Protecting my child from people who think it's acceptable to hit him isn't negotiable. But that's what I'm talking about. You're characterizing this as a hitting when it was clearly something much less serious. You're creating conflict where none needs to exist. You're making choices that will damage family relationships permanently over something that could be resolved with basic communication and forgiveness. What would resolution look like to you? I asked, genuinely curious. Vanessa apologizes for the misunderstanding. You accept she meant no harm. David acknowledges his reaction was excessive. We all move forward with better communication and more patience. I let that sink in. In Mom's vision, everyone bore equal responsibility. Vanessa would offer a non-apology for a misunderstanding. I would accept blame for misinterpreting. David would admit to overreacting. And Lucas, the actual victim, would be completely absent from the conversation. What about Lucas? I asked. What does resolution look like for him? What do you mean? I mean, what protections? What boundaries? What accountability measures to ensure Vanessa has processed why hitting a baby is never acceptable? Mom was quiet. Then, madly, you're overthinking this. He's fine. He's not going to remember any of this. You're creating trauma where none exists. There it was, the heart of our disagreement. In their world, trauma only existed if you remembered it. A baby couldn't form memories, so he couldn't be truly harmed. Adult comfort and family harmony took precedence over protecting children from experiences they might not even remember. After I hung up, David and I sat in silence. The movie paused. It was becoming clear, this wasn't blowing over. My family wasn't going to understand. We had to make decisions. I feel like I'm going crazy, I admitted. 3 different people told me what I saw didn't happen. People I've trusted my entire life. That's the point, David said. They need you to doubt yourself, because if you trust what you saw, you'll make choices they don't want you to make. If you believe Lucas was actually hurt, you'll protect him from people who might hurt him again. They can't have that. But why? Why is protecting Vanessa from consequences more important than protecting Lucas? David was quiet for a long time. I think your family has spent a long time organizing itself around managing Vanessa's needs and emotions. She's the center, the drama, the person everyone has to accommodate. Protecting that system is more important than protecting individual members who threaten it. That hit me hard. All my life, family decisions revolved around Vanessa. My achievements downplayed if they overshadowed hers. I'd accepted it. It never occurred to me that this system would prioritize Vanessa's comfort over a baby's safety. The final call of the day came near midnight. Vanessa. Her voice was softer, less defensive, more sad. Natalie, I know it's late, but I couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about how to fix this mess. I miss you. I miss being close to you like we were when we were kids. A pang of nostalgia. There had been years when we were close. I miss that too, I said. But I need you to understand why yesterday was so serious. Lucas is my baby, and seeing someone hurt him triggered every protective instinct I have. I get that, I really do. And I would never intentionally hurt him. You have to know that about me. Maybe I was too focused on the filming. Maybe I wasn't thinking clearly, but I would never deliberately harm a child. This felt like progress. An acknowledgement. Thank you for saying that. I know you wouldn't hurt him on purpose, but impact matters as much as intent. And the impact was that he got hurt. What I need is some assurance that you understand why it happened and how to prevent it from happening again. Of course. I think what I need to do is be more mindful when I'm around children, especially when I'm stressed or working. Maybe I should ask for help instead of trying to handle situations on my own. It wasn't a full apology, but it felt like movement. We talked for a few more minutes about boundaries. When we hung up, I felt cautiously optimistic. Maybe this could be worked out. But the next morning brought a text message that shattered any hope. It was from Chloe Martinez, our neighbor at Fort Henderson, a close friend. Saw Vanessa's Instagram story. Are you okay? My hand shook as I opened Instagram. Vanessa's story, family drama and moving forward. It was a carefully crafted narrative about the challenges of blending families with different parenting styles. She talked about holiday stress, the importance of forgiveness and grace when misunderstandings occur. According to her, there had been a minor disagreement, escalated by miscommunication and different expectations. She painted herself as someone trying to help a fussy baby who was misunderstood by overprotective parents. She never mentioned hitting Lucas. Never acknowledged harm. She framed the entire conflict as a learning experience about family communication. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, praising her maturity, her grace. I screenshot the whole thing. Less than 12 hours after what felt like a breakthrough conversation, Vanessa had publicly reframed the entire incident as a misunderstanding caused by my overreaction and David's inflexibility. She had taken our private conversation about her poor judgment and transformed it into a public narrative about other people's unreasonable expectations. She had positioned herself as the victim. And she had done it all while maintaining plausible deniability, never technically lying, but never telling the truth. When David came home from his run and found me crying, I showed him my phone. He read it twice, his expression growing grimmer. She played you, he said. The late-night call, the apparent acknowledgement, all designed to get information she could use to craft this narrative. I felt foolish, betrayed. The phone started ringing again. Mom, I assumed. But I was done. Instead, I did something I'd never done before in a family conflict. I started documenting everything. I wrote down the Christmas dinner events, direct quotes. I saved screenshots of Vanessa's Instagram. I noted each phone call, the language used to minimize the incident. For the first time, I was treating my family like potential adversaries. As I organized the evidence, I realized this wasn't new. This was how they always handled conflict. This was how they trained me for decades to doubt myself, to prioritize family harmony over my own well-being. But this time was different. The victim wasn't just me. It was my infant son. And this time, I had a partner who validated me. This time, I was going to fight back. The documentation process unveiled patterns I hadn't consciously recognized. Scrolling through old texts, I saw it. Every time Vanessa caused a problem, the same cycle played out: initial shock, then excuses, then pressure on everyone else to accommodate her version of events. There was a text thread from 2 years ago, when Vanessa was 4 hours late to our grandmother's memorial service because she was filming a makeup collaboration. Instead of addressing her disrespect, the family talked about how grief affects people differently. My hurt feelings were reframed as selfishness. Another thread, Vanessa damaging Mom's car, thousands in repairs, but the family discussion was about how accidents happen and material possessions aren't worth damaging relationships. Mom paid the deductible. The more I looked, the clearer it became. I had been trained to accept this dysfunction. To minimize my needs, question my perceptions, prioritize everyone else's comfort. Christmas dinner wasn't an anomaly, it was the most extreme example of a pattern that had been shaping my life for decades. David found me at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers. Looks like intelligence gathering, he observed. Exactly. I'm trying to understand how they do this, how they consistently make me the problem when they're causing harm. I gestured to a timeline of conflicts. Look at this pattern. Every single time, the same thing. David examined it: incident, denial, reframing, pressure to forgive, acceptance of their narrative. It's sophisticated. They created a system that protects Vanessa from consequences while training everyone else to doubt their own judgment. But why me specifically? Why am I always asked to be more understanding? Because you're the one who challenges. You're the one who notices when things don't add up. You're the one who asks uncomfortable questions. He pointed to my timeline. In every case, you were the one who initially called out the problematic behavior. They need to neutralize you because you're the threat to their system. That stung with uncomfortable accuracy. I'd always thought of myself as helpful. From their perspective, I was a disruptor. My phone buzzed, another text from Mom. Honey, I saw Vanessa's Instagram story. I hope you can see she's really trying to move forward positively. Maybe we could all get together this weekend to talk. I showed it to David. He shook his head. They're trying to reset the narrative again. Get everyone in the same room, apply social pressure, convince you to accept their version for the sake of family peace. But what if I'm wrong? What if I am being too rigid? What if there is a way to work through this? David put down his coffee cup, looking at me seriously. Let me ask you something. If one of my soldiers struck a baby during a family gathering, then spent the next week convincing everyone it hadn't happened while publicly reframing themselves as the victim, what would you think I should do? The question clarified everything. If this were anyone else, I'd be horrified. I'd tell them to protect their child, to set boundaries, to document everything. Right, I answered. So why is your family different? I had no good answer. My only reason for compromise was that these were people I'd loved my entire life, people whose approval I'd sought. But none of that justified exposing Lucas to harm. That afternoon, an unexpected call from Chloe Martinez changed everything. Natalie, I need to tell you something. I've been going through Vanessa's social media. I found some posts from earlier this year you need to see. She sent me screenshots. Professional photo shoots with baby props, captioned about new beginnings and expanding family. Another featured her holding a newborn, with text about being an aunt and special bonds. The problem? Both posts were weeks before Lucas was born. She'd used stock photos and borrowed babies, monetising her relationship with my unborn child, creating sponsored content before our family moments even happened. There's more, Chloe said when I called her back. I found a whole series of posts about family traditions, holiday celebrations, and multi-generational gatherings that all feature photos from Christmas dinner last year. The one you and David missed because of his deployment. She's been creating this narrative about close family relationships that doesn't actually exist. I felt sick. Vanessa had built a brand on fiction. Her followers thought she was authentic, but she was crafting staged content for engagement. The Christmas dinner incident suddenly made horrifying sense. She wasn't just filming for documentation. She was creating content for a business that depended on an image of family harmony. Lucas's crying didn't just threaten her filming, it threatened her entire brand identity. He and I were just props. And when he interfered by acting like a normal baby, she prioritized her content over his well-being. When David came home, I showed him Chloe's discoveries. He studied the evidence, noting dates, inconsistencies, patterns. She's been using your family as content for months, he said. Not just documenting, but creating fictional narratives. Which means Christmas dinner wasn't about family at all. It was about creating content to support her brand. And when Lucas interfered, she prioritized her content over his well-being. The realization was devastating but clarifying. This wasn't a lapse in judgment. This was a calculated decision by someone who viewed our family as raw material, willing to harm a child to protect her commercial interest. I spent the evening diving deeper into Vanessa's content. She'd used our wedding photos, stories about David's deployment, speculation about our future children, all for sponsored posts. Most disturbing were the posts about loving grandparents, portraying mom and dad as deeply involved, despite their minimal actual interest in Lucas. The gap between Vanessa's public narrative and our private reality was enormous. The next morning, a flurry of texts from family members, urging me to attend a family meeting mom had scheduled. The language was identical: healing, communication, moving forward. Clearly coordinated. But I was done being managed. Instead of replying, I called our insurance company to report the incident. I wasn't filing a claim, but I wanted it documented. The representative was professional but disturbed, asking if I needed resources for child protective services. I also called Lucas's pediatrician, Dr. Walsh, who immediately scheduled an appointment. The pediatric appointment was both validating and heartbreaking. Dr. Walsh examined Lucas, documented the fading mark, and asked detailed questions. Her concern was serious, regardless of intent. Parents need to trust their protective instincts, she told me. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Your job is to keep Lucas safe, not to manage other people's feelings about your safety measures. She also gave me resources for family violence and legal documentation. I hadn't considered legal action, but having the information felt empowering after days of being told my concerns were overblown. That afternoon, Captain Ryan Torres, one of David's closest colleagues, called. He and his wife, Maria, had become good friends. Natalie, Maria, and I want you to know we're behind you 100%. What happened to Lucas is unacceptable, and the way your family is handling it is concerning. A wave of relief washed over me. Validation. After days of being told I was overreacting, hearing it from other parents who found it disturbing was powerful. Thank you, Ryan. I've been doubting my own judgment about everything. Don't. You're a good mother, and you're doing exactly what you should be. David is lucky to have a partner who will stand up for their child, even when it's difficult. Ryan also shared that David had already consulted military legal services. The military took family violence seriously, and resources existed for service members dealing with civilian family conflicts that could affect their security clearance. This helped me realize we weren't alone. Our family of choice was standing behind us. That evening, I made a terrifying, liberating decision. I drafted a group text to Mom, Dad, and Vanessa, stating our boundaries. Calm but firm, we wouldn't attend family gatherings until Vanessa acknowledged what happened and demonstrated genuine accountability. The response was immediate and intense. My phone exploded. Mom, high with panic, begging me not to destroy the family. Dad, texting about a minor incident. Vanessa, alternating between anger and hurt, accusing me of being vindictive. But the message that stopped me cold came from Linda, Mom's older sister, someone who had always seemed to float above family conflict. Her text was brief, devastating, so the Instagram situation. This isn't the first time. Call me when you're ready to hear about the others. What others? David asked. I have no idea, but Linda wouldn't say something like that unless she had specific information. I called Linda immediately, my hand shaking. She answered on the first ring. Natalie, honey, I've been watching this unfold, and I think it's time you knew some things about your family they've been keeping from you. What kind of things? Linda was quiet. There have been other incidents over the years. Times when Vanessa hurt people, usually children. And the family always covered it up or explained it away. I never said anything because it wasn't my place. But watching them do it to your baby. I can't stay quiet anymore. The conversation lasted 2 hours and shattered my understanding of my family history. Linda described incidents dating back to Vanessa's teens, rough with cousins, harsh with children she babysat, inappropriate with kids at family gatherings. In every case, the family minimized it. Parents were told their children were dramatic. Witnesses were asked to keep quiet for harmony. Vanessa was coached on what to say but never held accountable. I've watched your parents train that girl to believe she can hurt people without consequences, and I've watched them train everyone else to accept it, Linda said. When I saw what happened at Christmas dinner, and then how they were handling it, I knew it was time to speak up. Linda also revealed something crucial: Vanessa had been born with developmental delays requiring extensive early intervention. Mom and Dad had spent years advocating for her, protecting her from struggles. The problem? They'd never transitioned from protecting a child with special needs to holding an adult accountable. They continued making excuses long past the point where Vanessa was capable of understanding her actions. She knows exactly what she's doing, Linda stated. She's learned if she can make people feel sorry for her, or misunderstood, she can get away with anything. And your parents enable it because they've seen her as vulnerable for so long, they can't recognize manipulation. By the time I hung up, I felt like I had a completely different map of my family. Decades of confusing interactions now made sense. The pattern of protecting Vanessa at everyone else's expense wasn't new. It was a system. And Lucas wasn't Vanessa's first victim, nor would he be her last if this continued. Christmas dinner wasn't an isolated mistake, it was the latest example of a long-standing pattern hidden from me because I'd been too young, too distant, too willing to accept family explanations. The next morning, absolute clarity. I wasn't just protecting Lucas from one bad incident. I was breaking a generational cycle of abuse and enablement that had been damaging children in my family for years. I called Linda back, asking her to document her statements. She agreed immediately. I reached out to other family members. Some were reluctant, but others were relieved to finally talk. By the end of the week, I had a comprehensive picture how my family protected Vanessa while putting other children at risk. Written statements, documentation of previous incidents, clear evidence that Christmas dinner was part of a larger pattern. David and I spent that weekend planning. We weren't seeking revenge, but we were committed to protecting Lucas and preventing future incidents. We decided to share our documentation with family members who had children, giving them information to make informed decisions. We'd maintain our boundaries. Linda's information made it clear this wasn't a problem for better communication. It required fundamental changes in accountability, which my family had shown no willingness to make. Most importantly, we'd build our own family traditions, our own support systems, independent of those who prioritize dysfunction over protecting children. Lucas deserved safety. He deserved adults who took responsibility. As I organized the evidence, I felt it, the satisfaction of complete information, the power to act. I was no longer the confused family member being gaslighted. I understood exactly what was happening. The war, which began with a slap baby, was about to become a battle for truth. And for the first time, I felt confident about which side would win. The breaking point arrived in a certified letter from Vanessa's attorney. It demanded I cease a defamation campaign against their client, claiming I was spreading false information and damaging her reputation. I stared at the legal letterhead in disbelief. I hadn't posted anything online. Hadn't spoken to anyone outside close friends. My campaign was documenting facts and sharing information with relatives who had young children. David read it over my shoulder. They're trying to intimidate you into silence. This is what people do when they're guilty but can't afford the truth to come out. The letter demanded I sign a statement acknowledging no assault occurred, that my claims were fabricated, and I'd refrain from future statements damaging her business. In exchange, no legal action for defamation. Business relationships, I repeated, the weight of it crushing me. She's not worried about family harmony. She's worried about her brand. Her income. I called Janet Morrison, an attorney Linda recommended, specializing in child protection. Janet saw me immediately. The letter is largely bluster, she said after reviewing my documentation. Truth is an absolute defense. But the fact they're escalating suggests they're feeling genuine pressure. Janet explained Vanessa's business depended heavily on her public image. If sponsors or followers learned of her history, or her fictional family relationships, the financial impact would be devastating. The legal threats weren't about reputation, they were about income. Prepare for them to escalate, Janet warned. People with a lot to lose can become dangerous. Document everything. Stay safe. Don't engage directly until we have a strategy. Our strategy session revealed options. A restraining order. Our own legal action for emotional distress. Reporting to Child Protective Services to create an official record. Janet helped me understand I wasn't required to keep family secrets that put children at risk. My evidence wasn't gossip, it was information other parents had a right to know. That evening, I made copies of everything and prepared packages for family members with young children, documentation of Christmas dinner, witness statements about previous incidents, and information about Vanessa's pattern of avoiding accountability. I wasn't asking anyone to choose sides. Just providing information. The response was swift and explosive. My phone rang constantly. Some relatives were supportive, thanking me. Others were furious, accusing me of destroying the family. Mom called in. Hysterics, demanding an explanation. She'd seen the documentation, devastated by what Linda and others had shared. Those things happened years ago. Vanessa was a child herself. Why are you dragging up ancient history to hurt her now? Because it's not ancient history, Mom. It's a pattern that's continuing today. And other parents deserve to know. But she's changed. She's grown up. She hit Lucas 6 days ago, Mom. Whatever changes you think she's made haven't addressed the fundamental problem. The conversation deteriorated. Mom begged, then threatened to cut me off. The same manipulation I'd experienced my entire life, but this time, I recognized it. Robert's response was different. He called late that night, controlled, strategic. Natalie, I understand you're upset, but this approach will hurt everyone. If this information becomes public, it could affect David's military career. Have you thought about the security clearance implications? It was a low blow, using David's career. But it also revealed his misunderstanding of military values. Dad, David's career is built on integrity. His command would be more concerned if he failed to protect his own child. But Vanessa doesn't have a history of violence. These are isolated incidents. Mistakes are accidents, Dad. Patterns are choices. And a pattern of hurting children, followed by a pattern of avoiding consequences, isn't something I'm going to help hide anymore. The most devastating call came from my cousin Sarah. She'd been present during incidents Linda described, and now a mother herself, had received one of my information packages. Natalie, I need you to know I believe everything you've documented. I was there for some of those incidents, and I've been carrying guilt about staying quiet for years. When I saw what happened to Lucas, and then how everyone handled it, I realized I couldn't protect my own kids if I couldn't acknowledge what I'd witnessed. Sarah shared details of a reunion where Vanessa had pushed Sarah's younger brother downstairs after he'd messed up something she was filming. He'd had a concussion. The family called it an accident, forbade Sarah from talking. I was 17, scared of drama. I've regretted it ever since. And when I had my own children, I made sure they were never alone with Vanessa, even though I couldn't explain why. Sarah's testimony was powerful. But then she revealed something else. Natalie, there's something else you need to know. Vanessa isn't just worried about her current business. She's been in talks with a major network about a reality show centered around her family content. Christmas dinner footage was supposed to be part of her audition reel. The information hit me like a physical blow. A potential TV show? Lucas's first Christmas, raw material for entertainment. And when he interfered, she prioritized the footage. The network executives are supposed to review her submission this week, Sarah continued. That's probably why she's escalating the legal threats. If this information becomes public, it could destroy the biggest opportunity she's ever had. I shared this with David. His reaction was immediate and intense, not anger, but the cold fury of someone who realized the full scope of a threat. She exploited our family for commercial purposes without our consent. And when our infant son interfered, she assaulted him, he said, his voice deadly calm. And now she's threatening legal action to prevent us from protecting other children from similar treatment. David's military training kicked in. We're not just dealing with a family conflict anymore. We're dealing with someone willing to harm children for financial gain and use legal intimidation to cover it up. That makes her a legitimate threat that needs to be addressed through appropriate channels. The next morning, David contacted his command. Colonel Martinez, his commanding officer, made it clear the military expected service members to report child abuse and protect their families. We can't have personnel being blackmailed or intimidated by family members, especially when child safety is involved. We'll provide whatever support you need. Their backing was immense. It meant David wouldn't face professional consequences. We had access to military legal resources. Most importantly, it validated our decision to prioritize child protection. That afternoon, Janet Morrison called with an update. After reviewing our documentation, she drafted a response that turned the tables. Instead of defending against defamation, we were putting Vanessa on notice about potential legal action for assault, emotional distress, and using our family commercially without consent. The beauty of truth as a defense, Janet explained, is that it forces the other side to prove their claims are false. Given your evidence, that will be very difficult. More likely, they'll realize pursuing this legally will only create more public exposure. The letter was a masterpiece. It detailed the Christmas dinner, the evidence, the pattern of incidents. It informed them of our evidence of commercial exploitation. It made it clear we weren't seeking media attention, we were simply sharing facts with family members. If Vanessa wanted to make it public, we were prepared. The response to our letter was immediate silence. No calls, no texts, no social media. The entire Sterling family apparatus went dark. But 3 days later, an unexpected development. Jessica Chen, a producer at the network considering Vanessa's reality show, called. She'd obtained information about recent events. Miss Brooks, we've received some concerning information about your sister's family content and the authenticity of her relationships. Before we move forward, we need to understand what actually happened during the filming session she submitted. I stuck to facts, commercial filming, incident with my infant son, family relationships not accurately portrayed. I didn't volunteer inflammatory details, but answered honestly. Thank you for your honesty, Jessica said. This information is very helpful as we evaluate our programming decisions. Networks have to be extremely careful about liability, especially when children are involved. 2 hours later, my phone exploded. Word had gotten back to Vanessa. She was in full panic mode. Mom called, crying, begging me to clarify that everything was a misunderstanding. Dad sent multiple texts about family loyalty. But the most revealing response came from Vanessa herself, who showed up at our house unannounced that evening. David answered. She stood on our porch, mascara streaking her cheeks, shaking with rage. You destroyed everything, she screamed. Years of work, hundreds of thousands of followers, business relationships. All gone because you couldn't just let things go. I didn't destroy anything, Vanessa, I said, my voice steady. I protected my child and shared factual information with people who needed it. If that destroyed your business, maybe your business was built on lies. It wasn't lies. It was content creation. It was storytelling. Everyone knows social media isn't completely literal. It's about creating aspirational content. David stepped between us. You used our family as props for fictional content without our consent. And when our baby interfered with your production, you hit him. There's nothing aspirational about that. I barely touched him. And only because he was ruining months of work. Do you have any idea how hard it is to create authentic family content when people won't cooperate with the vision? The admission was stunning. In her fury, Vanessa revealed she genuinely believed Lucas should have cooperated, and striking him was justified by her content creation. She wasn't apologetic about hurting him. She was angry he'd failed to perform. "Get off our property," David said quietly. "And don't come back. You can't just cut me out of the family. I'm Lucas's aunt." You have no rights to access a child you assaulted," David replied. "And if you come here again, I'll call the police." Vanessa's mask completely slipped. The polished influencer, the victim narrative, the claims of misunderstanding, all fell away, revealing someone who genuinely believed she was entitled to use our family. She left screaming threats, but her rage had strengthened our position. David had recorded the entire interaction, capturing her admission. Clear evidence of her mindset. That night, I felt something I hadn't since Christmas dinner, complete certainty. Vanessa's visit stripped away any remaining doubt. She wasn't sorry for hurting Lucas. She was angry that hurting Lucas had consequences. The war wasn't about one incident. It was about children's right to be protected, an adult's obligation to speak up. We chose protection over peace, truth over comfort, our child's safety over family dysfunction. The consequences were painful, but liberating. I was free from managing other people's emotions. The battle was far from over, but we had boundaries, and the resources to defend them. We'd shown ourselves, and our community, that some things were worth fighting for. Lucas would grow up in a family that prioritized his safety, valued truth, and understood the difference between love and enablement. That was worth any price. 6 months later, Lucas took his first steps in our backyard. David and I cheered. No cameras, no staged lighting. Just pure joy. The legal threats had vanished after Vanessa's recorded admission. Janet Morrison crafted a settlement, privacy for family matters, but we could share safety info with relatives. Vanessa agreed to counseling, but I doubted her follow-through. The reality show disappeared. Jessica Chen confirmed multiple corroborating accounts about Vanessa's history. The network, despite its reputation, drew hard lines around child safety. Mom and Dad initially stuck to their script, but as more relatives came forward, their narrative crumbled. Linda organized a family meeting where witnesses shared their accounts. It was devastating for Mom, who seemed genuinely unaware of Vanessa's patterns. She'd managed individual incidents, missing the larger picture. Dad absorbed it silently, retreating. Neither apologized directly, but their approach shifted. They stopped pressuring me. They started interacting with Lucas during brief, supervised, stilted but safe visits. It wasn't the warm relationship I'd hoped for, but it was workable within our new boundaries. Vanessa essentially disappeared from family dynamics, her social media shifting away from family content. She'd moved to LA, her engagement significantly dropped. The most surprising development was the response from extended family. Cousins and aunts thanked me for speaking up. Sarah became a close ally. My cousin Marcus, Mom's nephew, was particularly grateful. He'd planned to ask Vanessa to babysit his toddler, unaware of her history. "You probably prevented something terrible," he told me. "I can't thank you enough." The military community at Fort Henderson rallied around us. Colonel Martinez ensured David faced no professional consequences. Our friends shared their own experiences with cutting toxic family members. Captain Torres and Maria became our chosen family, their children playing happily with Lucas. "You know what I love about our gatherings?" Maria said. "Nobody's performing. Nobody's managing anyone's emotions. Just enjoying each other's company." Dr. Walsh confirmed no lasting effects on Lucas. "Children are resilient when they have consistent, protective caregivers," she said. "Lucas clearly knows he's safe with you." That meant more than any family reconciliation. David was promoted to lieutenant colonel, partly for his leadership during this complex family crisis, his integrity praised. I started volunteering with a family advocacy program on base, helping other military spouses navigate similar situations. I'd learned to recognize gaslighting and manipulation, helping others trust their instincts. Linda became ongoing support. She'd always wanted to speak up but lacked the courage. "Watching you stand up for your baby gave me permission to finally tell the truth," she told me. "Sometimes it takes one person being brave enough to break the silence." Linda also reported Mom and Dad were in counseling, trying to understand how they enabled Vanessa. "Your mother is starting to understand that protecting Vanessa didn't actually help anyone," Linda reported. "It's taken her this long to realize that love sometimes means allowing people to face the results of their choices." That insight was crucial for my own healing. I'd confused accommodation with love. Lucas's first birthday party was a celebration of authentic bonds. Our chosen family, Linda, a few supportive cousins. Small, genuine. David's toast brought tears to my eyes, to Lucas, who taught us the difference between family that demands your silence and family that earns your trust. May he always know the difference between love that protects and love that enables. No performing, no managing emotions, no walking on eggshells. Lucas played freely. As I watched him, I felt deep gratitude for our choice. He was growing up with adults who modeled healthy boundaries, authentic communication, and unwavering commitment to child protection. Eleanor's sister, Margaret, 93, shared stories from Eleanor that put our choices in historical context. Eleanor always said family isn't about blood connections or social obligations. Family is about people who show up for each other, who tell the truth, and who protect those who can't protect themselves. Eleanor had been concerned about Vanessa, dismissed by my parents. Eleanor would be proud of what you did, Margaret said. She always believed protecting children was more important than comfortable lies. That validation felt like a blessing. Watching Lucas navigate our backyard, confident and fearless, I understood. We'd given him something invaluable, the security of knowing his well-being was paramount. David joined me on the patio. Lucas discovered a butterfly, his delighted laughter filling the air. Any regrets? David asked quietly. None, I replied. Look at him. He's fearless because he knows he's protected. He's curious because he's never been punished for being a normal child. He's confident because he's never been told that his needs don't matter. David nodded. He'll grow up knowing that love means protection, not accommodation. That family means safety, not obligation. That his worth isn't negotiable, even with people who share his DNA. The lessons we learned through crisis became the foundation for our family culture. Lucas would understand that healthy relationships required mutual respect, that boundaries were self-care, and that sometimes love meant saying no to people who demanded harmful compliance. As the sun set, I felt complete peace. We traded familiar dysfunction for the uncertain work of building authentic relationships. The trade was worth it. Lucas would never remember that Christmas dinner, but he would grow up with the benefits of our decision. He would know his parents could be trusted. His needs mattered. Love never required accepting harm. The war that began with a slap baby ended with the victory that mattered most, a child who was safe, loved, and free to develop his authentic self, without performing for others. In losing my birth family, I gained something far more valuable, the knowledge that I could build the kind of family that actually deserved the name. Honestly, even telling this story now, it brings up so much. The anger, the betrayal, the relief, it's all still there. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between protecting your family and keeping the peace with your blood relatives? What would you have done in my place? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts.